Wagner head Vingy Prigozhin claims to have taken Bakhmut, even as mill bloggers are pulled in and are becoming casualties in this conflict. How correct is Bakhmut in imminent danger, and is Ukraine preparing for its own counteroffensive? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's April 3rd, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, a lot of news, but let's take a look at the control map. Biggest change in Bakhmut, as you guys can see, Russian forces surging in the south and also making some advances into the city center. Especially, you can see here, it looks like they have done a sort of lightning push to get into the city's center in order to, again, make their claim to have taken the city. As you can see, there is still considerable areas of Bakhmut under Ukrainian control. It's tough to say. It looks like probably around a 50-50 split, but again, the dense urban core is still mostly held by Ukrainian forces. But what's interesting is what's happening elsewhere. Again, we have seen sometimes small movements, small counterattacks by Ukrainian forces. And as you can see here near the town of Ozarynivka, it looks like a significant significance probably a stretch, but several hundred meters of bow in Russian lines. This is unusual for a couple of reasons. First, you can see it's just a little south of Bakhmut near Kurdyumivka and well north of Avdiivka, two areas where Russian forces have been concentrating. And while this could simply be a part of the routine ebb and flow of the front lines, it is unusual to see something like this reported. We don't commonly see, we haven't seen Ukrainian forces retaking territory recently. Now, obviously, I'm of the position that this is this would be a really suboptimal location to launch a counteroffensive, simply because it involves running through, while some sort of favorable terrain, there's much more favorable terrain, especially to mechanized warfare. Plus, you can see that it abuts the Russian border quite significantly. And the Russian border, of course, is a location where Russian forces can always retreat to in order to regroup, but Ukrainian forces cannot follow. And that alone is a tough situation to be in as an armed force when you know your enemy has a safe area when you do not. So I don't think this is part of any larger counteroffensive drive, though I always would remind people that sometimes doing the militarily unexpected move is actually the best call. You might recall in D-Day, the Allies crossed famously not at the shortest point between the UK and France, but at one of the furthest points, expressly because the Germans had arrayed their forces expecting that it would be ridiculous for the Allies to cross at the least advantageous terrain. But that made it the most advantageous terrain because it was the least well defended. So that sort of logic could apply here, where simply choosing the most undesirable location actually makes it, in a way, the most desirable location. But it's really tough to say if this is anything of significance. Of course, the other interesting thing to note is they're reporting a minor change in Volodar. As you guys can see, Russia holding literally a few hundred meters of pretty low value, I guess a roadway or a tree line here. This may be some sort of effort by Russia to flank Volodar, which would represent a marginal improvement in tactics, anything but continued frontal assaults. What's fascinating is that actually frontal assaults have become such a disaster, especially in Volodar, that the Russian propaganda machine is spinning up in order to try to improve the reputation of the 155th Naval Brigade. As the UK Defense Intelligence Brief points out, the 155th Naval Infantry Brigade has likely been reduced to nothing at least twice in the last 6 months due to being committed again and again to frontal assaults near Volodar. And it's become pretty iconic. In fact, there's been some viral footage that we've taken a look at of the graveyard of the naval, this 155th. And you can see just an absolute sea of men, some of whom appear to be professional soldiers, but many of whom are simply conscripts who have been killed in these futile attempts. Of course, if you guys want, we've taken a look at some of the tactics in Volodar on Combat Vet News. You guys know I got boot off of Patreon, so I launched my own site, combatvetnews.com, where I have not only all of my YouTube videos, we're going to also be posting Ukraine news updates, but we have the exact same membership tiers as the Patreon, with all the members-only content, including Patreon archives and additional combat videos that I do breakdowns of, but we can't get on YouTube. And that includes definitely some serious fighting in Volodar. We actually see in one of the earlier Patreon videos, I'm going to try to get on there today, the how ineffective Russian tactics are in this city. It really, some of the footage just really illustrates how untrained and panicky Russian forces are and how incredibly ineffective their tactics are trying to take this town. But this is only part of the news today. We're only like part of the way through. So let's take a look at, here's the video of Prigozhin claiming to have taken Bakhmut. And here he is, right here. He is. He says it's the Bakhmut City Administration Building. Claims he's putting a flag on the City Administration Building. It's not clear that the City Admin Building, du jour. Yes, he says du jour. Interesting. An interesting caveat. Of course, he's out here pointing out, right, that taking the admin building, not the same thing as taking the city. You guys probably know the downtown of your city and the city hall is not one and the same. But Prigozhin is probably really there, and he's filming this on a night vision IR camera. And you notice, I will say, he's getting some decent advice because there is no IR glint tape on his uniform at all. You can see he is probably, he's taking some chances, man. He is out there himself, for which, like, as much as of a worm and a dirtbag this dude is, he probably actually is in Bakhmut, and he probably is actually planting this flag. God help him. It's staged managed, but I can see why he really thinks he should supplant Putin, right? There he is, putting up his little flag. Again, this is not the same thing as taking Bakhmut, but nonetheless, a real sign of significant progress. But you may have noticed, he talked about a blogger in the name of someone named Vlad Tartarsky. And this is where the news gets even weirder today. That's because last night, an explosion tore through a cafe in Russia, killing an influencer named Vlad Tartarsky. And Tartarsky is a former criminal and separatist in Ukraine who fought and then became a mill blogger, including doing significant reporting from the front lines. And he was killed when he was gifted a bust of himself as a gift. And this was during a meet and greet, sort of like a live show. And about 100 people were in the audience. The cafe where this took place was actually owned by none other than Prigozhin himself. And the bomb, of course, planted in the bust, resulted in his assassination. Russia, of course, immediately opening an investigation. No one has publicly claimed responsibility. Russia, though some mill bloggers have claimed this was done by Ukraine, though Ukraine claims this is part of Russian infighting. Really, really bizarre stuff, but definitely a sign that, as we've talked about, these influencers, right, are a growing in influence, especially in a country like Russia, where there's very low trust in the mainstream media outlets. Individuals really trust mill blog commentators because of their willingness to get to the front lines, their willingness to speak at least their own mind, and their inability, the fact that they don't work for the Russian government. But of course, they come in all flavors, and Tartarsky sounds like a classic ultranationalist. His real name, Maxim Fomin, with 500,000 followers on Telegram. A really, really interesting turn in this war. And as we've talked about, this is unusual because it's one of the few conflicts where being a mill blogger really can result in influence. It really translates to actual on the ground influence. So kind of just a wild time just to be involved in this. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you for today. Certainly felt like a busy day. And we are going to be, I'm really curious tomorrow to see if this little bump in the Ukrainian lines turns into anything. Anyway, that's all I had, guys. And until next time, I'll see you in the next one.